Hello everybody, and welcome back. In this video, we're going to be talking about nations in HOI4 that don't really have any content. Some have a little here and there, but for the most part, these are nations that most people probably won't play ever until they've pretty much gotten through everything else, and we'll have a playthrough with that, or maybe there's a few that have achievements but aren't really that fun. So before we get into that, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm pushing for 100 subscribers. Hopefully before the next DLC releases in the next month or two. So let's try to get there. Alright, to start out, I got three different categories for this. We have the nations that just have straight up nothing really to do. Then we have the the countries that have formable nations, but realistically they're worse than any of the other nations that have that formable. And finally, nations that have no tree, but they do have a formable, and they're better than the other ones that have the formable as well. So let's start out with the six that have no tree but do have formable nations. There's a total of 30 nations we're going to go through, but let's start out with the category that I think needs the least effort. So starting out, we got Peru. Now Peru actually has two formable nations. There's the Peru-Bolivian Confederation, as well as Gran Colombia. This makes Peru actually a pretty fun playthrough because it's the only nation here that can get both formables, so that gives it something unique to do. It also has the decision to go in for Pastaza, which if you time it right, you can actually get to war with Bolivia, create the Peru-Bolivian Confederation, kill Colombia and Panama with justifications before with world tension. It'll go low enough, you can actually get it low enough where you won't get guarantees, and then Venezuela is fascist, they won't guarantee that, and you can use the decision to get to war with Ecuador and annex it all. So you can actually do both without any guarantees. It's actually, I've done it before, it's really fun. Problem is, like, they have extra cores here in like Paraguay and Chile and stuff that you probably will have to go to war with the allies for, but you can be a very strong nation before then. Not to mention, you start out as fascist, so like you're in a good position to start out, and Argentina, Chile, and Brazil, like, they all really join the Allies, so you can join the Germans later in the war and push up all the way up and invade the US. It's actually a pretty fun playthrough, so it's I think it would be the nation on this list that I think is probably in the best state currently. Moving over, we got El Salvador. El Salvador is one of the Central American nations that can create the United States of Central America with Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica. They also got the expansion into the Yucatan and Panama now with the latest update, which is great. Well, no, it was 2 DLCs ago. And the reason I have this one on the list of like better nations compared to the other ones is you start out fascist. That just straight up makes it easier to go down the tree to get militarism, military youth, which are both very powerful for small nations to conquer other small nations. It also lets you justify day one and not have to wait, because the other ones are all non-aligned or democratic, much longer to be able to justify. So it makes it the one that can unify Central America the best. So if you're going to play one of these 5, you're going to play El Salvador. Moving over, we got the Dominican Republic. Now the Dominican Republic can form 2 nations, Hispaniola as well as the Antilles Confederation. And out of the group that can form it, it is much better than Cuba or Haiti for the Antilles Confederation, because Cuba starts out democratic, so does Haiti. So just the fact that Dominican Republic starts out fascist, same reason as El Salvador. It's just, if you're going to try to build that formable nation, you might as well play this one over the other ones. Moving over across the world, we got British Malaya. Now British Malaya can form the Majapahit Thylacracy. Very hard words to say for me. Now, the reason I have it here instead of the Dutch East Indies is that when you do the Civil War as British Malaya, you do a Civil War as British Malaya, you break free from the United Kingdom, then you can invade the Dutch East Indies, which will put you at war with the Netherlands, but you can eventually get to war, get into the German faction, or just get naval docking rights and potentially get a naval invasion. It's a lot easier to get to war with the Netherlands and defeat them than it is to defeat the United Kingdom. So it makes it the choice to pick out of the 2 that can form that formable nation. Moving up, straight up, we have the Kingdom of Siam. Now, Siam is the only nation that along with Laos and Cambodia, but we're not talking about releasables in this video. We're talking starting nations. Should have probably mentioned that earlier, but mentioned it now. It's really it's the only starting nation that can form the Ratashid. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, empire. So it kind of by default gets on this list just because it's the only starting nation that can form that formable. And then finally, we move up to Tanatuva, which in the last video with the new war effort we discussed, it can now form Manchukuo with the expansion of the Siberian formable, as well as the Stan nation with Turkestan. It, out of the group, is also a pretty fun playthrough because it's very challenging. It has a achievement tied to it. It can do 2 formables, which now it has an even expanded formable than it used to. It'll be a good playthrough. Maybe I'll do that soon. But overall, it's got something to do with it. So those 6 nations actually have something to do. While they don't have any focus tree or really any content to them, they at least have something going for them. There's a reason to play those 6 nations. Moving on to nations that have formable nations, but are just worse. So just for a preface, we will not be doing Iran, Afghanistan, and Iraq because they are getting focus trees. So currently, Iran would have probably been put on the list with the 6 we've gone over because it can do the Persian Empire, but it's getting a focus tree, so it's not really going to be part of it. Iraq would have been part of the formable, but worse probably, just because of. Actually, it might be a bit better than the other Arabian formables, but it's not great. And then Afghanistan, worse than Iran to form it. But so like they kind of just evolved and left off. But moving over, we'll start off with Yemen. Now Yemen can form what's it called? Arabia. But obviously it's not very good nation to form it as. Now the thing with Arabia is there's actually quite a few nations that can form it. And I have Saudi Arabia in this formables but worse territory, but honestly with the rule set I'm going with, it should probably be part of the no tree formable section just because out of all of them, now it's one of the only 3 nations that can form Arabia but that are independent, not counting Iraq. So it should probably be with the other one. The reason I didn't really want to put it there is because Egypt, while is not a starting nation, is a releasable that gets an achievement, is probably better to do it with. If you release Libya, you can actually form El Andalus and Arabia. It's just this formable really isn't that good with these nations at the moment that I couldn't really decide what to put it on, so I left Saudi Arabia here as well. So Yemen, Saudi Arabia, and Oman. They all can form Arabia, but they're not really optimally to do it, and you just really wouldn't want to do it that way. You can't, Saudi Arabia would be the pick, as I said earlier, but it's not that big of a deal. Moving over, we have Luxembourg. Now Luxembourg can form the looks like it froze a little bit. There we go. It can form the United Netherlands, just like the Netherlands can. They actually removed it from being able to be done as Belgium, which I'm a little upset about, but some of the other paths are pretty good, so give and take. Now the reason this one has a little asterisk because there are election events in it, so it has a little bit, but realistically nothing worth playing over the Netherlands. The Netherlands is much better to form the United Netherlands. You really wouldn't play Luxembourg is a fun challenge, but besides that, no reason to really play it. Moving over, we have Bolivia. Now Bolivia is similar to Luxembourg, where it has election events and has a little bit of content to it. But realistically, anything you would want to do with Bolivia, you do with Peru, because the formable it can do, Peru can do as well, and then another formable as I discussed earlier. So you'd want to do Peru over Bolivia every time. So it realistically has no value. Moving up, we have Ecuador. Now Ecuador has a little bit because it has the where you can actually sue for peace and actually get Loreto and core it, which is pretty cool. The problem is that if you form the Gran Colombia, you would core that anyway. You need that state anyway, so it's kind of interesting, but again, it's worse than Peru for that reason because can do the same formable, but just altogether worse. This also includes Colombia, Venezuela, and Panama. They all can do the same formable, and they're all worse than Peru in pretty much every way. Panama, the worst out of all of them, it has nothing to do, and it can be cored by 2 different formables, so it's a nation you really don't care for. You have Ecuador, which would be the second worst, but it does have a little bit with Peru, so you could argue it's better than Colombia, but like we're being pedantic at that point. Then you got Colombia, which also not so good. And then out of the other ones, Venezuela is probably the best just because they start out as fascist, but they have this blockade mechanic, which they do use. Like the other nations do blockade you nowadays. Like in this patch, like I've seen the UK and the US do it, so honestly, it might be worse. It might be better. Colombia might be better than it now. I'm not really sure. Don't really play. And Colombia does have an achievement of forming Grand Colombia and having battleships, so it might honestly be better than Venezuela at this point, but I mean, it's not going to be much. Moving up, we have Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, and Guatemala. Same reason. El Salvador is just better to do the formable as, so there's really no reason to do them. They don't have much of a purpose. Same with Cuba and Haiti. Just nothing to really do with them. It just kind of sucks. This also then the final one would be the Dutch East Indies for the same reason we discussed. British Malaya can do it better. It can annex the Dutch East Indies, so it's just the better version of it. Although the Dutch East Indies is way more resource rich than British. Well, I mean, British Malaya is pretty good too, but like, so you could say like honestly, the Dutch East Indies isn't that bad, but the problem is you'd have to go to war with Britain, so there's just British Malaya is way better. So like these are just nations that they technically have something you can do, but they're just not that good because you'd rather play another nation over them. Kind of makes it sad because, like, at least with the other ones, you can have a fun playthrough. This is, you're playing a worse playthrough of already some of them are challenging and not that fun at all times, and this just makes it worse. So, moving over, we got the final set. Now, the final set is nations that just have straight up nothing. No formables, no focus trees, nothing to do. These are nations, borderline, you probably shouldn't even play them. That's how little they got to do. So starting out, we got Mongolia, which is sad. Mongolia really shouldn't be on this list, this part of the list, but here we are. It is objectively so much worse than Tanatuva, which is just mind-boggling how Mongolia is worse than Tanatuva. Moving down, we got Nepal and Bhutan. Nepal and Bhutan, nothing at all to do. Now, the thing is, though, they potentially could have something to do, because there could potentially be a formable in this region that they will get access to. So, potentially, they won't be on this list anymore. But for right now, they're staying here. Moving up, we got Tibet. Tibet's got nothing to do. And then after that, we have Manchukuo. Now, with Tibet and Manchukuo, they do have something where Tibet has a core on Zikang. I'm not very good at Chinese. But so they have a core outside of their starting territory, so that is something, but that's, I mean, you're not really going to do a playthrough just because of that. And then Manchukuo has 2 cores here in Outer Mongolia, which, again, they're even worse because they're a puppet, so you really wouldn't want to play them. But that I thought I'd mention it, that they do have cores outside of their starting cores, so it is something. Then moving over, we got the Philippines. Now, the Philippines have absolutely nothing and are a puppet of the U.S. and will be attacked by Japan, so it's just awful all around. Nothing good about the Philippines. And then we got over in Africa, we got Liberia, the only nation in Africa that's got nothing, which it's also, and I've talked about this in a previous video, this part of Africa has absolutely nothing going on. No reason to play anything here, which kind of sucks, considering we do got a starting nation here. And then finally, moving up, we got Ireland. Now, Ireland is in the same boat as Tibet and Manchukuo, where they got a core outside of their starting cores. Problem is, it's in the United Kingdom, so not much you can do there. So that's those nations. So that pretty much wraps up all the nations in total. There's 30 of them that have varying degrees of content. But I wanted to throw this video together to show off what nations have nothing going on, what have a little bit but not really worth playing, and what nations actually have a fun playthrough. So, based upon that, we can kind of try to infer that there will be a little bit of change to what regions, because right now, South America actually has half of the kind of useful playthroughs of Dominican Republic, El Salvador, and Peru, whereas the other ones are in the where the other ones will be in the Pacific, Indochina, I guess would be the region you want to call it, with one more being up in the middle of Siberia. So it kind of shows that it's all over the place with where they have stuff going on and where they don't. So hopefully with Mongolia and Manchukuo, and possibly even the Philippines, the Dutch East Indies, same, it really points to a Japan rework, because this region is just fairly empty. Because if with the British Raj, we got with the Graveyard of Empires update, we get something with Nepal and Bhutan, maybe even Tibet, who knows, where if we get anything with that, and then with a Japan rework, we can get something with the colonies here in Siam and maybe even Mongolia, that could really finish off this region and make it at least somewhat usable. So this was just a little video to show off what's going on in the world right now, to show where the possible next DLCs could be at, that stuff. Thought it was a little fun idea. Let me know if I forgot any nations in the comments, or what your favorite one out of this group I listed out is. And I'll see you next time.